All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. So the webinar is titled Master Property Valuations with Property Pricer. My name is Anthony Fernandez. I'm one of the product managers in the Simple Farm 360 team. Joining me today is Ross McClelland from Property Pricer. Morning, Ross.
Morning. So
Yep.
first of all, background in terms of me, I'm a retired management consultant. Uh, I've got heaps of experience, as you can tell by my age, that I've been doing consulting for years, professional services, similar to yours in terms of your professional service accountants to clients. And I did that for clients specialising in the people management, human resources, etc. area. And now converted that knowledge that I had over to how to accurately value residential properties. We don't do commercial or vacant blocks of land. Working out how to do residential was a huge exercise in itself. It took several years to develop and we've perfected it, and now to the point where we can guarantee high levels of accuracy. And we're very different to others, and you'll excuse me going through the slides here. Let's try a few, Anthony, if we can.
Yep. So what I'll do is just a quick sort of housekeeping as well.
Yeah, good. Thanks.
Today's session will be recorded. So anyone who's registered for the session will get a recording with the copy of the slides. At any point, if you have any questions, please type it into the Q&A window, and we'll endeavor to answer those while we go through the slides itself, or definitely at the end of the session. The way it's going to work is I'm going to hand over to Ross to go through, I guess, what makes Property Pricer different to some of the other valuers out there, as well as what their process is in terms of providing a valuation for their customers. And I'll sort of finish off by showing you, especially for those of you that haven't ordered a valuation through Simple Farm 360 previously, as to how you go about sort of finding Property Pricer on Simple Farm 360 and then going through with that process of purchasing a valuation. So what I'll do is I'll effectively hand over to Ross. Ross, it's all you now, and you should be able to have access to the slide deck as well. So yeah, over to you.
Good. So we've got here why is property price are different. And before explaining that, I think I'm not an accountant and I'm not a registered valuer. Registered valuers have their own qualifications. They're not required by the ATO, as you're aware of. They are required sometimes by law as a registered valuer. So we don't purport to be registered valuers. I'm also not an accountant. I've got a higher degree in commerce, and I did accounting one, and I think at the end of that, the lecturer was quite pleased that I'd chosen to major in something else because my accounting wasn't to the standard that you'd require. However, as a chartered management consultant, and particularly which you wouldn't think is relevant, is a global remuneration professional, that's given the methodology and the technical understanding how to measure properties as an asset in their own right. That's what property price in essence about. So we measure the property based on its unique features through, as you can see on the second line there, we use a points measurement scale, which creates a standard or a benchmark, which we can then use to measure value properties and in the end compare them. Importantly, in the end compare them, because most others try to compare at the beginning, and that just doesn't work. It's not a valid way to calculate anything. So the second point there, we've got the points measurement system, and we then can calculate all the distinctive features of the property, particularly those that impact on the value. You know, some things don't. Some things are just preference and a bias, whereas we have a range of questions in our input sheet, which we do for you as a professional service, and we value the property based on all its details. We've got it down to about 95 questions now. We used to have 150, which is just a lot of things don't impact on the value. For example, during the COVID it was very important to have a home office and room to have a dog. And those things, when I speak to real estate agents, were primary things whether people would be interested in a property. Well, home office is still good. It's nowhere near as important, but having room for a dog now is irrelevant and doesn't impact on the value. So just for example, in each of the options, in each of the questions, we have lots of options. So if we're going to look in a minute at probably the most important room in valuing a house would be the kitchen, and that impacts a lot on the value of a property. We need to collect the information, and then property price enables us to measure and calculate the impact on the final value of the property. So we're looking then in the last, I won't read them out for you because I know you can read. We've got detailed evidence of measurement and calculation. I know from the accounting standards and the tax office standards, which I won't go through because you know them 10 times better than me. I just know some of the numbers of them, that particularly the ATO requires evidence and the reasoning or the explanation of the method used. So we provide that in detail for you. Let's go on to the next one. Let's go there. We'll get it in the end. Bear with us. There you go. So I said it's all about you in a way, and that's the way we run the business. Our belief is we have a much better product than you've probably used to if you've never used us before. We provide top-level service. I own and run the company, and I determine the culture, which is based on putting the client first and not profit. And we strive to have the reports back to you, sometimes on the same day, third day maximum. Make sure that you're getting the service even after the reports. I've had a couple, not many, but a couple of accountants who come back to say the client's not happy with this and that. So we get specifics and then we can fix it, because there's no point in your client not being happy with your service. Delivered quickly, I've mentioned. We've got the cost down so that it's affordable and reasonable. Current date, that's from the last 3 months, is 79, about to be increased to 89 in November. And then for retrospective reports, that's older than 3 months, 179 to be increased to 189, both plus GST. So we've learnt from accountants that they're kind of pretty reasonable figures that people don't mind paying. There are cheaper ones, obviously, you know about. You can get some of them through CoreLogic. They're auto type valves. They openly in their disclaimer say that they don't take account of the individual features of a property, such as a view, renovations, a pool, etc. So kind of a different product really, in a way, not to the standard that we would provide to you. So the whole idea of the advantage to you comes from my experience, particularly when we sold our consulting company to Mercer. Mercer, you've probably heard of, is a US company from superannuation, financial planning and funds management. So maybe you've come across their name. We sold our company to the human resources, the people management division. What was really good about that, and it particularly related to what we do for you, the two things, firstly, that they trained us in, firstly is a system called peer review, which was that all reports have to be reviewed by a colleague before they're sent out, and both people share responsibility. We do the same with your reports. Nothing ever goes out without someone else peer reviewing and checking it to make sure the quality's there. Things add up, that, you know, we're not comparing apples with oranges or whatever that I've seen in some other reports. The other thing that I learned from Mercer was the American, you know, it's got to be accurate down to 2 decimal points. And, you know, I remember one of the directors came out and said, you know, what a funny country you people have here, because you've got terms like, you know, close enough, it's good enough, and it'll be okay, mate, or something. And then he said, you also have invented a football code, which you actually get a score when you miss a goal. And, of course, if you don't follow AFL, that you get 1 point for a behind. And he said, that's unheard of. We don't go for that sort of inaccuracy. So from an Australian consulting firm to an American meant we had to up the ante, quality, accuracy, and making sure that the client's happy, because they had another program called Helping Clients Succeed. And I learned a lot from that, because it's a bit like Jeff Bezos says, put the client first and the client's king. And although we thought we had that, it was nowhere as good as the Americans did. So translating it, what we do now in our business is the whole aim is to make the clients happy. Firstly, Anthony at BGL's got to be happy. You've got to be happy. Your client's got to be happy. The auditor's got to be happy. Otherwise, we haven't done our job properly. So, and we do whatever it takes to get that outcome. So kind of, joining the dots on that experience I've had over the years is a really foundation for the culture and the way we treat you as clients. Let's move along. What have we got now, Anthony? Just bear with us, being the first person. I think we covered that one just a second ago. We don't go over it. Oh, this is a good one. I really like this. And I got this from a movie I saw recently, just to be honest with you. And it was a murder type thing. In investigations, details matter. And I thought, that's what I've been thinking all this time. Details matter. And what really, really irks me, some of clients' accountants have sent reports they've got from others who they no longer use. And I look through the reports, and I know it's not good to bag your competitors, but there's no detail. It's terrible. In other words, it's this property values higher. Well, why? Details matter. So I think you'd agree in accounting, details matter. I definitely think that in property valuation, details matter. So in our approach, it's none of this, it's 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1 car and 100 square meters. Like, that is just intellectually lazy, I call it. So we need lots of details to make sure of accuracy. And the first step, as we're reading the slide here, first step in having accurate and reliable valuations is to collect all the details about a property. And my take is that no one else bothers to do that. And we're talking about all the details. And I think it's kind of common sense and life experience that if you're looking at properties, whether it's your own house or a client's, the details matter. It matters in northern Queensland if you've got ducted air conditioning or not. It matters if you've got a pool or not. It matters if you've got a landscape, manicured, beautiful garden, or it looks pretty ordinary. I mean, those details matter, and yet I find that most methods don't even take them into account, let alone measure and calculate the impact of those things on the value of the property. So that gives you surety that we're doing it properly and professionally, not, it'll be right kind of thing. So that's just an aside of the way we do things. Let's have a look now at step 1, building characteristics. So what Property Pricer does, it kind of reverse engineers properties. So, I'd look around, and if you do in the same street, what's funny about Australia is hardly any of the houses are the same. You can go up a street and there'll be 20 houses and they're all different. So what makes them different? That's where I started, and I thought, right, let's analyze this, reverse engineer it, and come up with the key steps. The first key step is the building itself, not the block of land, which can be a bit of a focus on 700 square meters, whatever. So the building characteristics we have to get first. And we've got the slide there. You can see this is a really, really high level, nice home. And you can see that the characteristics of this are quite different to most. In fact, you can probably guess they're different than the 2 neighbours there. So we've got a 2-story modern brick, looks like professionally cement rendered. We've got a triple garage, lovely lawn, quite small. We've got a tile or slate roof. So you're getting the picture now. We're now going to enter those details and measure them so we get step 1, the building right, because that's the core, no pun intended, foundation of getting the valuation correct. Next, we've got to look at the building materials, number of levels, and whether it's architect designed. There's lots of houses now which This one, I would think you'd agree, is architect design. It's not what they used to call project homes. The last point then, we want a thorough assessment of all the features to include in the valuation calculations. And this step one is the core of getting the accuracy. And to my understanding, tell me if you know differently, no one else really bothers measuring the building itself. They're too preoccupied with the land and something else. So the next step, now we've looked at the building, let's look at the inside. So let's now focus on the distinctive features of this property, and except if everything is cookie cutter in some new estates I see, most houses are very different, particularly if they're older ones, which most of the clients that you send us are not new properties, except a few units. There's a huge difference, for example, in the kitchens, bathrooms, and the room sizes. So we've got now lots of options we can go through and pick the differences. Behind that, the system allocates different points, which will get different property levels. Renovations on point 2 is a big one. And we have on the input sheet that you'll see on the BGL site, we have a question at the end saying, is there any additional information we need to know? Because if your client's property has been recently renovated, wow, that's super important, because taking it on old photos that might be 10 years old and valuing on that, when in fact they've just spent a heap of money on having a beautiful new kitchen like this one shows. Then we look at interior design and quality of the property, obviously not the furniture, because that's not part of the value. And, you know, it ranges, as you probably guess, from an old kind of fibro timber place up to beautiful mansion size and anywhere in between in terms of the quality. So that's step 2, that's the interior. Oopie-dee, we'll get there in the end. We're nearly there at step 3. One little, oops, got it. Now we're going to look at the exterior, because this is really important. You can see from the photo, this place looks pretty magic, doesn't it? How do we value all that? Well, first of all, we need to look at, it's got a pool, it's an in-ground pool, it's a big pool. It's not just a little tiny thing, it's not above ground. There are lots of places now, particularly units, apartments, that have resort-style pools. They'll have a barbecue, an al fresco, boom, 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 and that values them higher than if they don't. And we need to collect those facts, input them, and then the system calculates it all. So the exterior is really important. You can see this one's got glass out the back. It's got a rather large balcony, and it's all modern, and we measure all that. Good, let's go on now to step 4. Now we've actually got the property itself, the asset, almost totally valued. We need to know now what is the exterior things that impact on the value of the building. So we're looking now at locations and proximity to things. You know how important it is if you're near a beach or a river or a lake or a parkland. Public transport people value. There's also the negative effect now, proximity to undesirables. Kim and I were doing one the other day, and this lovely house in a Melbourne suburb was really nice from the front. You went in the backyard, and the backyard was the Coles supermarket delivery truck car park, which, like, you look at that, no, I'm not buying this place, you're kidding. Or if I buy it, down goes the price. So that impacts enormously on value. The opposite, had a place the other day which was overlooking this really lovely park, great for kids, the family, the dog, whatever, and all the others were just facing somebody else's house. So that one values more. And you can see now at the last point, we take into account views, and this took a lot of research, particularly with water views and waterfronts, to work out what percentages, what value to put on each. On water views, Australian documentation says it makes a difference between 20 and 80%. And I thought, yeah, thanks for that. That's no help at all. Interesting, I found the best analysis from Spain and California. This is 3 years ago when we started developing it. Interesting, in California, for fun's sake, they differentiate between salt water and fresh water, and we laughed and thought, you can just imagine a a property on an estuary, so at low tide it's worth more than at high tide. And I thought, yeah, you're right. That is not going to work. But if you think about water views and water frontages, I think there's 7 types of views, 7 types of aspects, and 12 types of waterfronts. And I remember a friend not far from where I live who's got a waterfront, and she said, we were talking about it one day, and she said, yeah, but we can't go swimming for hours, and actually there's a pathway in between and a small cliff, which is totally different than when I looked at Palm Beach in Sydney a while back, which was a terrible house, but it was waterfront. You walk out the front door, there's a road, across the beach onto one of Sydney's finest beaches. So you get, if you don't take all that into account, how do we get accurate values? So you get that step 4 is pretty important. Let's do property. Now, the method that talked about, without getting too technical, is summed up in this bar chart. A PRL is a ranking level. So what we do with the points, we can rank properties from 1 to 10, depends on the standard and quality. So you probably got the idea 1 and 2 is kind of pretty ordinary, you know, it's shack, fibro, whatever. And the 10 is a 9 and 10 are to die for mansions. This one's a 5, which is about halfway between. We expect that'll be around the median of the market. But now we know we've got the asset by itself valued in a non-monetary way. Get it? So non-monetary, we've got a 5. We know it's not a 3 or a 7 because that'll attract a different value in the Australian market. So that's what the PRL's about, and that's kind of the maths behind our system to measure the property itself. So now we've got a 5, let's say, it's a good, pretty average property, how much it's going to be worth in a different suburb. So now we go to number 6. We'll nearly get there. Let's flip it over. Very sensitive to get it over, isn't it, Anthony? Got it. So now we've got the property. Now, what about the suburb? We all know that different suburbs are worth different amounts of money, right? So you can see that, again, we've got SVL is a suburb value level. Not to insult people in country towns, because it should be S&T, because we call it, you know, a suburb or a town. They range from 1 to 10. So wherever you live, and I can prattle off because we don't do them all over Australia, you know, a 7 is a pretty high level suburb. But again, a 5 is probably about average. Wherever you live, you can identify those. You know, if you're in Melbourne, for example, you'd say, well, Box Hill's probably a 3, and Brighton and Toorak are probably an 8, 9, and 10 around that area. And you can imagine in your own city what that's going to be. So the importance of this, we've calculated CoreLogic data to specifically say what that suburb's worth. And, you know, I've had real fun with this because you can get a PRL 5, like an average house. You put it in expensive suburb like Toorak, Darling Point, and Tenerife in Brisbane, where it's a 9 or a 10, and that exact same asset is worth 2 to 3 times as much. No change to the asset at all. So you get now the importance here, and the importance for the auditor is that it's now explained to say that property in that suburb is worth X. And that's what we aim to use, so that it's kind of beyond anybody saying, how do you work this out? Is it just guesswork? I love these two. You know, it's sometimes just for fun. We've got 2 names that you can probably relate to. If you follow cricket, you'll know Steve Smith, and George Michael now is passed, but he's fairly important British singer. These 2 I did for fun to see how we could come close to them. And I contacted the agent in each time and said, do you mind if we do this? Because they're high level, and I didn't know what they sold for, particularly because we did this before, submitted it to them so we couldn't be accused of cheating. And, you know, these are top level mansions, particularly the Palm Beach one at 13 millions. Oh, they don't get that much higher. Love the comment I got from the agent. No one else could figure it out because there are no comparisons. We'll talk about comparisons in a minute. These 2 properties have no comparisons, especially the Palm Beach one. The next sale in Palm Beach was 6 million. Like, how do you figure that's a comparison? I mean, it's not evidence, is it? So now, Anthony, checking in with you. How are we going for time, by the way, seeing I'm running solo?
We've got another half an hour for the webinar. We've got a couple of questions, Ross, if you want to tackle them now.
Yeah, good idea. Why not?
Let's just for a change of pace. So the first one is from Brett. Does the system work for country properties? So non-metro, specifically interested in country South Australia.
Done lots in country South Australia. Because some of your client, a lot of your clients are from South Australia, and a lot of them have investment properties. There's a couple I'm just thinking on the Murray, and then a few down towards Millicent and Mount Gambier as well. Did one recently in Edithburgh and the York Peninsula, and remember there's two main parts. The PRL is the asset. So as long as we know what the property is, it doesn't matter if it's in Ayers Rock or in Tasmania, as long as we know what it is, we can value that by us running it through the system. Now we need data on that area. So Edithburgh and the York Peninsula, there's some data there. And if in doubt, I then, or our team will ring an estate agent.
Okay.
Because they know the local information as well to make sure that it's going to be accurate. So in other words, if we can measure the property, because you give us all the details, and we've got some reliable CoreLogic data, because CoreLogic's the best data available in Australia, we marry the two and we come up with an answer. It doesn't matter where it's located.
Cool. There's another question from Tim. Do you do historical valuations? Let me just add to that as well. How far back can you go in terms of historical valuations? So retrospective.
Did one the other day for 2010. I think that's as far back as we've ever been. It takes a while to dig up the data. CoreLogic, though, has the comparison properties, which is great because the ATO requires 3 comparisons. So without that, it's not good for the auditor. It makes their job too hard. So that's the answer. We can go back. Most of them are 2 or 3 or 4 years old. But yeah, it takes a bit more time, especially to get the matching data so that everything adds up and the auditor will be able to go, yep, all makes sense. It's all 2012, whatever, tick.
Cool. Actually, Brett's come back, so he's specifically interested in Port Lincoln, South Australia. Is that?
Yep. Done a couple in Port
That's
Lincoln. And don't mean to be a smarty, because if I hadn't, I would say. But again, some accountants in Adelaide have clients with properties there. So Port Lincoln's got enough data in CoreLogic to be able to calculate.
Cool. And we have a couple of questions on, do you value commercial properties, vacant land, or rural farms? I'd say the answer to that is no. You just focus on residential.
The only one with rural farms, the hobby farm type is okay, not a production farm. We've had lots, we might get in the Adelaide Hills, for example. Some of them, they're on several hectares or, and a few in Queensland. They're okay as long as it's not there to, as a grazier, for example, or growing wheat or something. That's a different system. Cool. And we don't specialize. Property price are not designed to do those.
And one final one, can you investigate these building measurement details from property contracts or photos if the accountant or client doesn't have all these details readily available? Use
Google Earth. It's easy. Measure anything on Google Earth's great. So we can measure, if it's not provided, and often it's not, then Google Earth, we can do the size of the property, the land, the size of the house, and the size of a garage, carport, if there's a separate studio or granny flat. You just measure it in and then add them all up. The house is 110, the granny flat's 30, the garage is another 30, add them up and we've got, 200, that kind of thing.
Cool. Do you want to continue or jump back to the presentation and we can tackle the rest of the questions towards the end?
Yeah, okay, we'll do a few more.
Yep, cool.
What have we got on the next slide there? So we've got the valuations. It's not working on me now, Anthony. What's it done? There we are. Can't show you that one yet. That's cheating now. We just go a bit more. One more. Next. This business about comparisons, I actually hate it. to be honest. And yeah, comparison's a double-edged sword. We were taught comparison dangerous in management consulting. I did a lot of work on remuneration, which is, often senior executive salaries and packages and whatever. And if you thought you can get away with the comparison by saying, oh, 6 companies do that, and what, you're kidding. No board or whatever ever accepted that. You have to actually calculate first and then justify and substantiate that. Then you can use comparisons. So that's the last point. We only use comparisons to validate or justify a predetermined value. You can't determine the value of a property by comparisons than any method I know. It's just guesswork. And although the 2 funny buildings, a bit old-fashioned on the left, I think it's a good example in Australia. If you just got 2 properties there and they're just so different, and we find that comparisons are dangerous for another reason, just while I'm thinking there. I'll tell you an instance I had the other day. Kim and I did one, and it was a property in a normal suburban area. And we couldn't tell by looking at the comparison photos, because we get the comparisons from CoreLogic, they provide it, which is great. It could have either been 500,000, 700, or 900, and we could be damned if we could pick the difference between the properties in their descriptions and photos. So we could have picked 500, 700, 900, and nobody would have known the difference, and that's absolutely unprofessional. So lucky that PP said that it was worth, I think, 695 something. So already that targets us in that we'd be looking at properties around 700,000. So comparisons really have to be well chosen and only used at the end to substantiate, not to do it in the first place. Oh, I love this one now. I'm not an accountant, but I went to the US to learn about ROI, return on investment, of culture programs and things regarding people. And I learned from this expert in Des Moines, Iowa, of all places, who would work out a methodology to calculate ROI on systems. And, he said, what we need to be careful of, Ross, is evidence is not proof. We need to isolate the variables. I mean, he talked like an auditor to me, not like a human resources person. We need to isolate the variables, calculate each variables, and then determine, blah, 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 and it went on. And that's how I get proof. And I've learned from him. And I mean, if we watch enough TV shows about the law, you get, the judge says, this evidence is not admissible or something. And yet, when we get to properties, you can put any damn thing in. I got a report from a client the other day, and the comparison was 2 years old. Now, my understanding is in the tax office that should be within 6 months. So that's evidence, right? And they put it in there. It's not proof, though, is it? So what we go is, now we've refined our reports in the last couple of weeks, actually. Now we have a comment on each comparison property to say why this evidence is actually proof. And I figure that the way it works, more than I, is that auditors now are actually the judge. And we've got a couple from clients who've been sent back from the auditor, and they've chosen us, which is nice, to say, can you do better? Because the auditor says, no, this evidence is not actually proof. So I've never heard that before in property, but I thought it's just a nice thing to add in, because that's the way we see it. Let's go on to the next one. So we mentioned now the first point, we've got to have 3 comparable properties. Occasionally we get an inquiry from an accountant, do you have comparisons? Yeah, we have to, because that's what's required by the auditors. We never have a level of confidence, because if it wasn't high, we wouldn't submit the report to you in the first place. And I just can't stand these ones I see where it says estimate is low level of confidence. So, well, that's terrific. You'd never get away with that in accounting, I'll suggest. If you send a report and say, we don't have very high confidence in our balance sheet, but, I mean, it's just unthinkable, isn't it? Anyway, that's just my opinion. And we think, therefore, it's a bit of marketing, isn't it? But our tool outperforms others because we can value things much better and more comprehensive. So kind of summing up in this way, we're a full service provider. We do it for you. We've got expertise in the judgment in how to value the different properties, making sure it's accurate. Our job is to make sure you look good helping clients succeed. There's no way we're going to provide something which isn't good. And if it isn't good enough for you, then we would fix it. If we have missed anything, and then we would include it. Occasionally we'll get an accountant come back, say, well, the client forgot to tell us that it's been totally renovated inside. Yep, okay, we can fix that, redo the report, revalue it, send it back, no extra cost. Next one. Where have we got? Let's just see. This one I got the other day from Simon, who's an accountant in Melbourne, and we went to extra length. I'll let you read that one, I reckon, so I don't read it for you. So I mentioned before, I own the company, I set the culture and the way we do things, and Simon's comment is the way we do things. There is no way that we're not going to provide a top report, no matter what it takes to get it right, that you're happy, your client's happy, and the auditor approves it. That's kind of the way we do business. And that's the lovely comment that we got. I like 5-star reviews, and I'm amazed that we don't get any 3s and 4s. Anthony and I know we got a couple of rough ones when we first started because we didn't have our systems and processes in place. That was the first few months, and they were 1- and 2-star reviews. If I got any now, I'd be devastated, and I'd be getting back to say, what do we need to do differently? We're not supposed to bad competitors, but I did look one the other day on their reviews, and it was 80% negative, and it said it, and I thought, God, I'm glad that's not my company because I'd fix it. But anyway, that's their business, not mine. Now, that's one. Let's have a look. This is just for fun. A client in Melbourne sent this to me, I think last Thursday, and I thought, this is to die for, isn't it? I mean, what a photo. That's actually Mount Buller in Victoria. And of course, the photo is in the middle of the ski. So you can see the two people on the right, they're just about to go down. They ski from the front door. How do you value a property like this? Well, 2 ways we know. Firstly is to know the details. So there were photos and comments about this is a prestigious property, half its accommodation, half it's a hotel. Beautiful, you can see the stone chimney there, beautiful fireplace, boom, boom, highly prestige, 3 bedrooms, 3 en-suites, forgive us, and walking, or it's not there, well, you don't walk, do you? Ski to the chairlift. But, this is a good one, and it's a bit more about telling how we do things. Mount Buller doesn't have any data. CoreLogic has nothing on it. The comparisons have price undisclosed, which is just no help. But I noticed there was, and it's Yates, I think, the Port Melbourne real estate agent. He must have a monopoly, I think, on Mount Buller sales. So I rang him, actually. He said, I'll have a look on our website. There's about 10 properties. I know this one you're talking about. So, this is what real estate agents are really good at, and we use them as necessary to get the outcome for you. So he told me about it. And he said, the properties, I'll give you the details of the other ones. That was sold in August, and that was so-and-so, but it's a lot bump on. And the other one was sold in April, and but none of them are as prestigious and good as this one. So that, to me, gave the confidence in valuing the property, and there's about as much evidence as proof. But anyway, it's a great property to talk about, isn't it? Because it looks so good. And I've never done one like that before, so it was good fun.
Thank you.
Right.
Have a good day.
A pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.